Q's perspective. Chained to the heretic's torture table, I cringed as the final words of my late commander returned to my mind's forefront with utmost vehemence. He was right to curse me, for what I had done was a betrayal of the highest order. Why did I surrender? Why couldn't I bring myself to simply accept my fate and pop the xylitol? All these thoughts and more rattled through my mind as I tentatively tested the strength of my restraints. Maybe if I can escape and bring back the knowledge of what we've learned, the gods will forgive me. This, however, was a pipe dream at best. Trapped in the heretic's lair with no actionable avenue for deliverance, my only real option was to play along with their twisted games. Perhaps, I reasoned to myself, the heretics were keeping me as a sacrifice to their demonic pet. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the awful thing. Legend said that Talon served as a calming agent to our gods, inducing within them a pleasant, dreamlike state. This creature, however, was no god. The fact that a holy substance enraged it so only confirmed what we already knew. This thing was the precise antithesis to our god's holiness. I cringed as the sound of a creaking door indicated the heretic's arrival. Whatever tortures to which I was about to be subjected would surely make my former option of a quick death outright merciful by comparison. Unfortunately, the heretics were smart enough to forcibly remove my toxic capsule. Though I was slightly sedated at the time, I distinctly recalled one of their surgeons plucking it from my mouth like a harmless cyanide mint, and in doing so depriving me of the gods' sweet embrace. My train of thought, however, was rather abruptly interrupted when into the room stepped that creature which would surely haunt my darkest nightmares for so long as I may live. The demon which had with such ease dispatched us was now stood over my helpless form. "Guess who I brought?" the heretic interrogator taunted, regarding my newfound bout of struggling with a short click of laughter. "No, please," I whimpered, my logical thought processes once again overridden by a faithless drive for self-preservation. I could never admit it to my fellow believers, but I did not wish to be a martyr. I simply lacked the faith. Now, however, the hopelessness of my situation was finally beginning to kick in. I couldn't handle torture. In fact, much as I hated to admit it, I actually had to cheat on the willpower test by taking painkillers beforehand, allowing me to hold out for the minimum time. Slowly stepping toward me with the grace of a stalking gashi, the demon regarded my helpless form with a look in its eyes I could only reason to be deceptive in nature. Had I not known any better, I might almost assume it to be pitying me. "Your name what?" it asked primitively, eyeing me up and down like one would a particularly delectable meal. Of course, I knew better than to give a demon my name. "Three gods in equal renown, Hearth Sage, Soul Healer, and Elder Scribe. I am their servant, and you, demon, will not break me." At first, my reply seemed to confuse the creature, evidently defying its expectations of an easy mark. That being said, there was no time to celebrate my small victory, as immediately following my reply, the heretic interrogator retrieved from his terrible toy box an instrument I recognized from training, the shock prod. Without skipping a beat, the blasphemer jammed the tool's two sharp prods into my neck, sending through it an electrical current which prompted from me a pained squeal akin to that of a hatchling. Visibly disconcerted by this Redscale's method, I watched as the demon quickly lunged from behind him and effortlessly plucked the device from my torturer's hands. Compact stature aside, this thing was far stronger than the average kafel, leaving little chance for my tormentor to retrieve his tool. Fear flooded my conscious thought as I watched the creature ponder this device, clearly contemplating how to cause me the most pain with it. Closing my eyes, I awaited helplessly the oncoming torture. Seconds passed like hours as I awaited the horrid machinations of pure malevolence this creature would surely delight in. However, when no such pain presented itself, I risked opening my eyes to steal a glance as I saw this demon casting aside the shock prod. Clearly, whatever it was capable of would far outclass a tool or mortal interrogation. "Chose not die," the demon began curiously, removing my arm restraints and allowing me to sit up. Whatever its game, clearly the creature sought before Claw to lull me into a false sense of security and evidently had convinced the Redscale to acquiesce, judging by the brief conversation which concluded with it once again turning toward me. Why? It continued, forcing me to think for a moment as I pondered the meaning of such a question. What does it matter? I grumbled, laying back down and directing my gaze toward the drab concrete ceiling. Everyone else is with the gods now. I was simply too cowardly to jump the nest. Again appearing baffled by my answer, this creature continued its verbal assault. Mind cleaned? It muttered to itself, momentarily confusing me with the term evidently borrowed from its demonic tongue. Here, you tell us, we help you, it continued, moving around, its strange appendages as though to punctuate the words, escaping its flat snout. Never, I hissed, resisting the demon's temptation with a half-hearted display of my teeth, the last semblance of a weapon available to me in this trying time. Silence sliced through the air like a dagger, as without another word the creature began making its way around to my side, placing its uncannily warm fingers beneath my chin and leaning in to provide me a better look at its freakish facsimile of a face. Okay, I'll tell you, I whimpered, unable for the time to contain my terror and once again allowing fear to guide me from the god's path. Nevertheless, however, my answer appeared to appease the creature before me, as it promptly removed its meaty talons from around my neck and once again set to speaking. Friends died. You didn't. Why? Hanging my head in shame and narrowly holding back tears, I replied, Like I said, I was too afraid to die. I regret my weakness now, I confessed, hoping and praying the gods might hear my plea and simply strike me down as I asked. The gods, of course, did not work that way. I had abandoned them, and they in turn have done the same to me. Not weak, the heretic beast began, placing its disgustingly smooth claw between my neck and arm. Tears coalesced within my eyes as, despite its horrid nature, the demon's touch nevertheless comforted my weary soul. You are strong, it affirmed. By this point, I could contain my emotions no longer. Fear for what would soon happen to me. Anger for what I'd done, or more accurately, what I hadn't. Hatred for the heretics and their betrayal of divine order. All of it was just too much. And just like that, I began to sob. Suddenly it felt as though the responsibility placed upon my young yet tired shoulders had multiplied eightfold, and now finally I was given the opportunity to set them down. I could hardly believe how badly my treacherous mind wanted me to throw it all away. Whatever it says, don't you dare believe it. The god's voice echoed in my head, reminding me that this thing was in no say like a coffle. It wasn't comforting me, it was trying to butter me up so I'd betray my divine masters. Shut up, I hissed, desperate to silence this creature before it could further taint my thoughts with its perverse persuasions. Gods, I murmured, prompting from this horrid creature a small recoiling of surprise. Forgive me, for I have no other choice. Then, with silent fanfare, an idea materialized within my mind. A beautiful thought surely brought down from on high. If I can gain their trust as a victim of false teachings, perhaps I could sabotage the heretics from within. If this demon wanted to turn me against my own people, then it was surely mistaken. Suddenly, the discolored skin around the demon's mouth began to contort into what I could only presume was a gesture of false sympathy. Your name what? It asked, its question seemingly coming as a surprise to my interrogator, so even they cannot truly control it. Fascinating. Q, I began, allowing without restraint my tears of former failure to flow down my face. Perhaps this was the opportunity intended by our gods, for me to be captured and to deceive these heretics for the good of our people's collective souls. What do you want me to do? I asked in a tone of false compliance. This was my chance for redemption. If I played my cards right, these heretics and their demonic spirits could finally be guided into the warm light of their demise.
Andrew's perspective. All things considered, the interrogation was a resounding success. Frustrating as it was to rely upon my own broken Zintrish tongue, Q seemed to understand my caveman speak with relative ease. To be completely honest, I was surprised at just how compliant the captured Providence soldier had proven himself to be upon my entry into the equation. It was clear by how this young soldier reacted that my appearance was deeply unappealing to them. I will readily admit some degree of self-consciousness upon this notion. Perhaps had it not been for their curiosity and open-mindedness, Vavi and Chot may have reacted to be in similar fashion. Then again, perhaps it was merely a matter of Q's past indoctrination. From my understanding, Providence couldn't even get along with their own kind, let alone being able to behave cordially with an alien life form. Walking through the halls of an alien civilization's seat of power, once again did the sheer weight of my predicament begin to weigh upon me. My decisions would, for better or worse, be cemented into the history books. Now again, I began to contemplate whether or not I was doing the right thing by providing wartime technology to the people of Zintril. "Hey!" Behind me, the sound of Teague's voice echoed across the long hallway between us, prompting me to glance back at him curiously. When we first met, I had presumed the red scale to be on most accounts harmless. However, seeing just how quickly he was willing to resort to physical torture to get information out of the Providence operative, my perception of him had not left that room unscathed. Nevertheless, I stood still as the diminutive man approached me, jogging down the hallway at a brisk pace before halting just a few feet away from me. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his usual tone of nonchalance replaced by one more professional. "I'm fine," I shrugged, regarding the red scale with a more careful eye than before. The way he shifted so effortlessly from ruthless efficiency to friendly conversation was jarring, to say the least. Which of these two competing pieces of him would prove to be the mask remained, however, to be seen. "Just wanted to say you did good back there," assured Teague, reaching up to place a clawed hand upon my shoulder. "Most folks don't really have the stomach for interrogations. Honestly, I didn't at first either." "Is that so?" I challenged him, my words seemingly surprising the red scale. Gathering together my mental inventory of Zintrish phrases, I continued. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you were having fun back there." "Luckily, you do know better," claimed Teague, his expression suddenly one of somber reflection. Hearing how hurt he sounded, I could hardly help but feel as though I were being unfair to him. Up until the interrogation, he had been nothing but kind to myself and those around him. If this were some sort of act, he was definitely doing a good job of it. "Of course I don't enjoy tormenting people, not even those who deserve it," he continued, following my gaze toward a painting apparently done by their first prime minister. "But if you let them know that, they'll try to play on your emotions, use mind games against you." Offering up in response to his explanation little more than a nod of affirmation, I turned my gaze away from the painting and back down the hall toward where Salkim resided. There, elegantly striding down the hall with an indignant expression upon his face, was Chot. "Ah, there you are," the diplomat chirped, masking beneath a thin veneer of cheer his evident distaste for whatever subject matter I was about to be briefed on. "The Prime Minister wishes to speak with you alone." A certain bitterness coated Chot's tongue as he spoke, reaching its crescendo upon the mention of myself and his superior speaking without him present. "And just how am I supposed to speak to him without you present to translate?" I asked, vocalizing a concern most likely first brought up by Chot himself. Regarding my question merely with a non-committal shrug, the ambassador continued. "I wouldn't worry too much about that," Chot sighed. "Something tells me Salkim will be doing most of the talking." "Did he say why he didn't want you with me?" "I like to imagine he would," my acquaintance replied, closing the remaining distance between us before promptly shifting his gaze toward the painting I myself had previously been admiring. Then again, that sort of defeats the purpose of a secret meeting, doesn't it? Equal parts curious and disquieted by Chot's mention of a clandestine parley, I nodded in thanks to him for notifying me before promptly making my way down the hall in the direction from which he himself had arrived. Stepping into Salkim's office and politely closing the door behind me before meeting the Prime Minister's gaze, I obediently approached a nearby cushion and at his behest seated myself upon it. "You wanted to speak to me privately?" I asked curiously. Initially seeming somewhat bewildered by my words, Salkim cleared his throat and began himself to speak. "I'm afraid I cannot understand your language all that well, human," he sighed, his words filtering into my head through the translation earpiece. If you do not mind, I would far prefer we converse in the Zintrish tongue. Would you perhaps be amenable to that? Mine Zintrish not very good. I shrugged, suddenly feeling woefully inadequate, stood before an alien world leader without a translator to speak on my behalf. But me try, and that is all I ask of you. Salkim proceeded, standing from his own seat and approaching the window behind him, peering out over the city's skyline. Tell me, human, how are you enjoying your stay on our fine planet so far? Carefully running the question through my mind's filter in search of any potential trickery, I nodded to myself upon finding it to be mere empty gesture before promptly providing my answer. Your home world, beautiful place! Kafel are lucky as humans! Ah, yes, Salkim preened, taking almost patriotic pride in the alien complimenting his planet. It is actually on the subject of Arkisa that I wish to speak with you. What of it? Suddenly assuming a somewhat more serious posture, the Prime Minister continued. Allow me to start by thanking you, he began, turning back around to face me before promptly leaning upon his desk's surface. Not since my election have I last given thought to after the war. Now that such a possibility exists, I find myself wondering what our planet's fate will be. What do you mean? I asked. Tell me, human. Salkim began anew, gazing deeply into my eyes as though searching in them for an answer to his query. Is your planet unified? Not even close, I chuckled, shaking my head almost sadly as I contemplated what a unified Earth would even look like. Why? Pausing once again for dramatic effect, Salkim continued to speak. Knowing now what could lie beyond the stars, I fear what could happen if our planet remains divided as it is now. What are you proposing? I asked suspiciously. After the war, there will be a massive power vacuum, began Salkim, staring down almost longingly at my provided blueprints. With the technology you could give us, we could unite Arkisa once and for all. Sir, with all due respect, I began, my spine suddenly sampling the weight of an entire world placed upon it. Are you sure that's a good idea? Suddenly a long pause fell between us as the Prime Minister contemplated my hesitance. Finally, following several seconds of searing silence, he continued. What if the next aliens to land here aren't as benevolent as you? He asked rhetorically. Will a handful of divided states really stand a chance of fending them off? Maybe not, I murmured beneath my breath, seeing all of a sudden the logic behind Salkim's proposal. But from what I've seen of this planet, I'm not sure you guys are ready for that. Then help us prepare, the Prime Minister pleaded. Show us what works and we can build an empire that spans stars. Please, Andrew. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing at all. Tomorrow begins our first counterattack using H-Man technology, Salkim continued, picking up the pile of blueprints provided and carefully filing them away beneath his desk. It will be a time of celebration. Meanwhile, consider my offer. What should become of Arkisa after the war's end? I felt sick,